welcome everybody to the first full episode of the Global Gamers Podcast. I'm Ed.
I'm Ryan.
And we are so excited to be doing our first actual episode of this podcast. And we decided that what better way to get into this than to give all of you a sense of which games we love. So you can decide whether you are on the same page as us or if you think that we don't know what we're talking about and you're going to go somewhere else.
Yeah. So, we're kind of going to give a rundown of our top 10 games each, give a little explanation, background on what we like about them, and, the other thing I'll say is we don't know what the other person picked.
No, we don't. I think you probably have a sense of what I'm going to say for certain things. But,
yes, we have an inkling of what each other's preferences are.
Yeah, but we're going to keep it overall as a surprise. And I think, crucially as well, and I think this is a good thing, is that we took two different approaches to how we made these lists.
We did.
So I think I just went for straight up, these are the 10 games that I love the most. And I don't care if they overlap a ton and have similar mechanics. I just love these games. And that may mean that for some people you agree with me, and for some people you might be like, gosh, he's a shill for designer X, publisher Y. But I don't apologize. That's just how it's going to be.
Well, and honestly, I feel like I'm kind of glad we are coming at it from a different way, and I feel like the way that you're talking about it is the more straightforward one. Like, people hear top 10 games, what you're talking about, your top 10 favorite ones, is what people are going to think of.
Right. So how did you do your list?
Yeah, so I'll say a little bit about how I did mine. The basic idea was I was thinking about it, and I will admit part of the reason I chose to do it this way is because I think in some ways we have similar taste in games.
Absolutely.
And
we play games together. So like
we do.
Unless you and I were playing a game that the other person hated, makes sense.
Right.
Then we probably will have some overlap.
Yes. And so with that in mind, I kind of thought, like, if we did the top 10 and I just did a straight one the same way as you, we'd probably have very similar ones. So instead I took it in a slightly different direction. So here's basically what I did. I thought, let's say, was doing a weekend away, doing board gaming out in Shenandoah or something, park near here. And I was thinking, what 10 games would I bring? And with that in mind, I kind of thought different game genres, picking one or two favorites from each, and just to have like a nice sampling of different types of games. So
that makes sense. I mean, if I did that, I don't think all my stuff for the weekend would fit in the trunk, because some of these, as we'll get into, have big boxes, but we'll get into that.
True. Would have to rent a second car for the games.
Yeah, just like have a tow truck behind. So with that said, do you want to kick us off and give us your number 10?
Sure, I'd love to get us started.
Tell me.
So coming in at number 10 for me is Dune Imperium.
Oh, this is a game that I have not played, but I'm intrigued. Tell me.
Yes. And so I guess what I really enjoy about this game is it combines some mechanics that I like from other games. You know, you get a little bit of worker placement in there, but it also has a deck building component, and I feel like those two pair together in a really interesting way. Full disclosure, I also will say that I've got a couple friends that are very good at this game, and I've played it enough with them to, know the basics of the game, but not enough that I consistently beat them. So right. I feel like it's kind of a growth game for me, where like I'm like going up against people that are more experienced than me.
I'm not gonna say the game I'm thinking of right now, but I think we might discuss, or I might have some questions about Dune Imperium again when we discuss a game that will be on my list at some point this evening.
Sounds good. I definitely have a strong guess on what that one might be.
Yes. And I think most people, if you're tuned into this thing, you are well aware that these two games are often compared to each other. But we'll get to that at some point.
Yeah. So, Ed, what is your number 10 game on the list?
So my number 10 is actually not going to be fulfilling the prophecy of not fitting in the trunk, because my number 10 is actually a relatively compact small box game, and my number 10 is Cascadia.
Ooh, okay.
Yes.
Excellent.
So Cascadia was a big hit for 2021, I believe. Won a ton of awards, or was it 2022? But either way, won a ton of big awards, and
it was Game of the Year, I think.
Yes, and what I love about this game is it is by no means the most complex game on my list. It may even be the least complex of everything on my list for my top 10. But this is a game that is really accessible. You can teach it to almost anybody. It is peaceful. It is a great puzzle. And something that I really value in games is, in addition to like artwork and component quality and how it looks, is just, if I lose, do I still feel like I won? Because I'm just really proud of what I've built. Yeah. And Cascadia definitely does that. Yeah. And I've taken this home and played it with my family. I played it with you. I played it with random people at our local board game store. And it is so easy to teach, so easy to learn, and everyone seems to have a good time. Even people who played the first time and missed certain things still love it and want to play again. I'm a big fan of board game expansions. Yeah. This is one game where I don't even think it needs it, because it's so tight and the replay value is just in it. Yeah. And I wouldn't want it to become like sprawling by adding in, I don't know, what other animals are not in it. Yaks or something. I don't know.
I'm trying to think what other animals are
snakes.
Widely seen in the Pacific Northwest, right?
Bigfoot.
Bigfoot, there you go.
The Bigfoot expansion coming soon.
Yeah.
Okay, so number 9. What is your number 9?
So my number 9 game is a party game, and that is Just One.
This is another game that I have not played. I'm 0 for 2 with your list right now, which is odd. But tell me why I should play this game.
Yeah, we got to get it to the table. So basically, how this game works is some of the mechanics are similar to Codenames. You're basically trying to get one person on your team to guess a word. Mm-hmm. But the trick is, it's a cooperative game.
Okay.
Basically, the whole group is cooperative. And so what you're trying to do is, everyone has a little whiteboard, and you write down one-word clues on it. And then one person closes their eyes, and they're the guesser. And before they open their eyes, all of the clue givers show what the one word they wrote to each other. If anyone wrote the same word, it's erased.
Oh.
And then the guesser does not get that clue. So it's a little bit of like a game of chicken, where you want to give a clue that's specific enough,
but you don't want to be too obvious so that you overlap. Right. My number 9 is a game that you and I in particular have history with.
Ooh,
this is Scythe.
Scythe is number 9. Okay.
So Scythe is a Stonemaier game published in 2016.
Yes.
And it is a big hit. You've probably heard of this game if you're listening to this show. It is an area control game, but it's also kind of an engine building game, because while it is super scary looking with a big map and mechs and all that kind of stuff, it is way more about maximizing your turns and your resources and getting to the end as quickly as possible.
Right.
And paying attention as a result to how other people are pacing themselves.
No, I think that you're right, because the tempo of the game can change a lot.
Yeah, and you could think that you have time, and then you just don't, because as soon as somebody gets the final objective out of their 6, instantly game's done. No extra turns, nothing. Yeah. Which can be brutal, but I just think it's really smooth and rewarding to upgrade your base and just get a ton of resources and just put those stars in place and gain popularity and strength.
Right.
And it has just a really unique way of having combat be available but not necessary. The way the combat works is really fun, in that it's not just rolling dice like Risk. You get to like spend strength that you have, that people know you have, and then you can also kind of bid with strength cards you get to use based on how many mechs you have on a spot. I just really enjoy it. The artwork is incredible. The theme is really cool. It's this alternate universe, 1920s post Great War scenario in Eastern Europe where everybody's trying to take control of this like
Abandoned
rundown
factory?
dystopian factory, and there's mechs, but at the same time like peasants in the field. Very cool. One thing that I will say is that, and I think this applies for both of us, is that we have not played with 2 of the 3 expansions. So we have not played with the Rise of Fenris, which is the big expansion that people often say makes this game absolutely amazing. But I'm a little bit skeptical about it because it adds in a campaign element to the game, and I'm not a huge campaign player.
And the airship is the other one.
The airship is the other one.
Yeah.
Which I would probably get that more than Rise of Fenris unless I really wanted to commit to trying the campaign. But I just love the base game with all the different factions, and I do have the Invaders from Afar faction that adds in the final 2. It's really fun.
Yeah. Albion, and then I forget what the other one is.
It's like Japanese themed.
Yeah.
The purple one.
Right.
Yeah. So that is my number 9, Scythe.
Sweet.
Number 8, tell us.
Number 8, I've got Betrayal at House on the Hill.
Really? This is in the top 10.
Yeah, so the reason I put it in the top 10, a few reasons. The main reason is I wanted at least one cooperative non-party game in my top 10, and I mean another popular one, Pandemic, but honestly I like this game more than Pandemic. And Horrified. I mean those are solid games too, but just personal preference, I particularly enjoy playing Betrayal, and I think it comes down to a few things for me. The 2 main things I really like about the game are, one, I love the idea of the house being different every time, the tiles, and like the modular board game design where it's like you're exploring the house tile by tile as you go.
And also that the haunt is completely different.
Precisely.
So like, I mean, this game, I wouldn't say it has the most replay value of all games, but like there are 50 different haunts in the base game, and then there's an expansion that adds another 50 plus an additional level to the house. I haven't played that because I don't even feel like I need to.
We should get it to the table. I picked it up the other day.
So I have played Betrayal so many times. I had that is kind of like the first game that I got on my shelf like as an adult.
Yeah.
So it has been played a ton of times. It's a little bit beaten up, and even after all of that, I still haven't done all the haunts.
Yeah, you've probably done what, like maybe half of them?
Maybe, and like there've been a couple that have had repeats. And I definitely prefer some more than others, and think some are more balanced than others. But like,
any favorite haunts?
I don't know if I can say I have a favorite one, but I have a favorite experience with one, just because of how funny it was. I actually was on a skiing trip in West Virginia with a mutual friend of ours, and she and I and a couple other people were playing Betrayal, and we were playing, and we built out the house more than I have ever built it out in my entire life. Like, we basically got every room.
You were out of tiles by the end of the game.
Basically out of tiles before the haunt was triggered. Then we pulled the haunt, and the haunt was basically collapse the entire house except for like 3 rooms. And so it was really funny. So we basically went from having the biggest house to having no house.
Is that the one where it's gradually like getting sucked into the
No.
black hole?
This was instantly destroy the entire house.
Oh my word!
Yeah. So it was just it was a very memorable experience. But anyway,
pretty funny.
Anything else about Betrayal?
I mean, I think you hit on the other one. The other reason I like the game is the replay value of the different haunts. Between that and the house, especially Halloween season, always gotta get that one out to the table a couple times.
Like you cannot let the month of October go by without getting at least one game of Betrayal in.
Totally agree. How about you? What's your number 8?
My number 8, and this is gonna be the first of a couple games from a certain publisher.
Okay.
My number 8, Raiders of the North Sea.
Raiders of the North Sea.
By Garphill Games, designed by Shem Phillips.
Nice. What do you like about the game?
Everything. So, Raiders of the North Sea is part of the North Sea trilogy of games, which was the first, they call them the medieval trilogies that Garphill Games is doing. So the North Sea trilogy was the first one, and then there's the West Kingdom trilogy, and now they're on the South Tigris. So we did North, West, now we're doing South, and eventually the East. I have not played the other two games in the North Sea trilogy. Consensus seems to be that people don't like them very much, and they weren't that well received. So like they never got the big boxes. One of them is out of print, that kind of thing. But Raiders of the North Sea was such a big hit that it just really blew up this small publisher from New Zealand. And since then, they have really built on what Raiders set up. So this game, as the name kind of suggests, it is Viking themed. The artwork by this guy who goes by, his name is the Miko, is really fun. It's like this very loose, illustrated, rough style. The characters, the Vikings. In this game, even more than some of the other ones, the character work is amazing. They look really dynamic. They have really cool outfits, weapons, facial expressions, all of it. And what you're basically doing is you and the other players, you're all part of the same Viking clan, but you are trying to impress your chieftain by getting the most stuff for your Viking clan. And you do this by raiding territories across the sea. Mm-hmm. And the further away you go from home base, the more points you'll get. And you also get points from, doing tribute to the chieftain. And then with the expansions, which is really what makes this that high, the Hall of Heroes and the Fields of Fame expansions, they add in additional mechanics where you can go questing, where you can fight these enemy Vikings from other tribes called Jarls, and you can kill them, or you can recruit them into your team. You can drink mead and strengthen your team. When your own Vikings die, they go to Valhalla, and the Valkyries take them there, and you get points for killing off your own team. They can take wounds and bleed. It's very, very fun, very dynamic, and there's a lot of different paths to victory.
Yeah, there are.
One final thing I will say about this is that Garfield Games actually did a re-implementation of this game called Raiders of Scythia that is in their Ancient Anthology series. And I had played that version, and I was on the fence for a while about which one I should get, but the consensus seems to be Raiders of the North Sea with both expansions is the best way to go, but Raiders of Scythia base game is better than Raiders of the North Sea base game, if that makes sense. Because what Scythia did basically was it changed the theme, so you're Scythian warriors riding across Eurasia.
Yeah. And
instead of going further away from your Viking village, you're going further away from Scythia. So instead of the fortresses being the big raid, it's Greece. Yeah. So you go through parts of the Middle East all the way to Greece.
Right.
And they take out certain things like the Valkyrie and killing your crew, the fame, but they add a drink that you can use to heal your people. I played it. I still prefer Raiders of the North Sea overall with both expansions, and I prefer that art style. But if you wanted to get one of these games and you didn't want to invest in all the expansions, maybe look at Raiders of Scythia.
Yeah. No,
what is your number 7?
So my number 7 game is a game that I spent a lot of time playing during early days of the pandemic, and that is...
It wasn't pandemic?
It was not pandemic. Did not want to tempt fate.
Right.
That on the nose, right? But my number 7 game is Dominion.
Ooh. And another game I have not played.
Yeah, another game we haven't had the chance to get to the table together, but I think what I like about this game is I'm a fan of deck building games, and I wanted to get at least one deck building game on the list. So yeah, just kind of basic elevator pitch for this game is you start out with a deck that's mostly money and victory points, and then you are, over the course of your turns, chaining together actions to play additional cards, drawing additional cards, earning money, earning buys, and you're buying up both cards to let you lengthen your turns in all of those ways, additional actions, additional cards, additional coins, and then you're always working towards buying victory points.
Okay.
And then the person with the most victory points at the end of the game wins. And endgame is triggered in a few different ways. One is there's 3 different value of victory point card, and when the pile with the highest value pile, when the last one of those is bought, the game is over that turn. Or the cards that you're buying for the deck building element that you're adding to your deck. There are 10 piles of 10 cards in the base game.
Mm-hmm.
And if 3 of those piles are exhausted, the game also ends.
Okay. This is a game that I know has a lot of expansions.
It has
each one comes in a full-size box.
Yes.
And it's a game that's a little bit older, right?
Yes.
So,
I want to say the original game was maybe 2008.
That sounds about right. So my question with this, and part of like why I think I've been a bit hesitant about it, is it one of those things that's kind of difficult to get into at this point? Like, would you be able to just get the base game and be content, or would you feel like you have to buy this backlog of over a decade of expansions? Or
I see what you're
could
saying.
you like buy a few that really stand out? Is it still releasing new content?
Yes.
Or like, you know, are there other what I've always wondered is like, are there other deck builders out there that are like more modern, more streamlined, that are easier to get into? So
I would say there may be. I guess in some ways it's a legacy game for me, in the sense that like I'm in it already,
right,
and playing it. I will say, once you've played it and games like it a fair bit, the base game is a little bit repetitive and stale. But one of the best features of this game is, you know, you're playing with 10 different cards each game, but I want to say the base game comes with maybe 50 different cards, so you can switch out and like do customizable ones, and like no game is the same.
Okay.
Which is fun.
I'm definitely down to try it.
For sure.
I don't know if like, especially if you have a lot of the content, if it would make sense for like me to invest in it personally.
Right.
But it sounds fun.
Sense.
So my number 7, and this is going to be part of the Garfield Games marathon in my top 10.
Yeah.
And I think this may be the first game that we will have as a crossover on our lists. I would be very surprised if this is not on your list.
Okay.
My number 7, Architects of the West Kingdom.
Nice.
So, as you well know, Architects of the West Kingdom is a masterpiece of worker placement.
It really is.
As I mentioned with Raiders of the North Sea, this is part of the next trilogy that Garfield Games did in the West Kingdoms. This was the first of that trilogy.
Yes.
And this one is designed also by Shem Phillips, but for the West Kingdom trilogy, he also has a co-designer, S.J. McDonald, who I will talk about in reference to another game on this list. And they co-designed the whole West Kingdom trilogy, and Architects is the first in that trilogy. It is set basically in the Carolingian Empire in Western Europe in the 8th or 9th century, and you are basically architects helping build up the kingdom for the king. So you can do this by building buildings for the kingdom, working on the king's cathedral, and in the expansion, building wonders. Mm-hmm. So there are 2 really special key components to the main game. The first one is the virtue track. So you can decide if you want to be very virtuous, so you get points for being virtuous, and it also lets you work on the cathedral, or you can be corrupt, in which case you won't get the points, or you can even lose points, but it will give you the opportunity to cheat on your taxes.
Yeah, you can cut some
go
corners
to the black
a
market.
little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's a choice, and sometimes you may even want to be corrupt and then race to get some virtue towards the end of the game so you can make up some points.
Right. So I think that is an important distinction.
Yeah.
It's not like a whole hog thing where it's like you decide early game you're doing one thing and then are stuck with that the whole game.
No, it's flexible, and some of it will be based on which asymmetric player power you have at the beginning, which is also very cool. The other big thing that is essential in talking about this game is the approach it has to worker placement. So you start off with, I think it's like 20 workers, which is a lot, and you don't have to unlock them. You have all of them at the beginning, and you can use them however you want. And the more workers you put on a single spot, the more resources you get.
Right.
But the way that balances out is that you can go to a spot on the board and you can bring back your own workers, or you can arrest groups of other people's workers, capture them, imprison them on your board, and then drop them off in the prison at the guardhouse, and you get paid money to drop off other people's workers.
Yeah.
So that's really fun.
It's a nice check to balance out the effect of having multiple workers.
Yeah.
On
One
a
thing
spot.
I will say about this game, though, is that I've had a couple people play the base game, or the base game with just the Age of Artisans expansion, and not be wowed by it. Particularly in a 2-player game, I think this is a game that thrives on a higher player count because of that interaction of not knowing who's going to take your stuff when.
Yeah.
But when you throw in the second expansion, the Works of Wonder, people really seem to be won over by this game because the wonders are really cool. They're these big chunky wooden blocks that give you like extra actions or help you move up a new track, the influence track. And the influence track itself, you can sacrifice influence for discounts on certain things, which gives you some flexibility.
Right.
And it also introduces a princess and a profiteer, who are 2 like characters that move around the board, and you get rewards or punishments from being on the spot where they are. So it just adds in a lot. This is a really fun, dynamic game.
Yeah.
And like Raiders and Scythe, you really have to pay attention to how much longer the game has, and maximize how much you can do, because there's no rounds, there's no limited number of turns. It just goes until a certain number of spots in the guild hall are taken up, and then everyone gets one more turn, and that's it.
Yep.
So that is my number 7.
Nice. No, that is definitely a favorite of mine as
I
well.
know.
Architects of the West Kingdom. But yeah, I will go to. I think we're on number 6.
Number 6.
Great. So my number 6 game is one that you've mentioned already, so we don't need to belabor the point. But that is Cascadia.
Oh, I didn't expect this to make your top 10. I'm very happy.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Cascadia as well.
It makes sense. It would go to the cabin, I guess.
Yeah, well, right. You've definitely got that rustic charm factor. If this is for a cabin weekend, as I painted the scenario. But like you, I think big plus of this game for me is it's easy to pick up and learn, but like there's so many trade-offs that you're playing with almost immediately, because you're inevitably having to make choices between laying your tiles for your different ecosystems, and then doing your scoring for the animals. And like you're quickly going to run into situations where you can't have the best of both worlds, and you've got to like pick and choose,
especially if you're waiting for something to come out of that bag, an animal chip, and it just isn't coming, and you just have to pivot because you don't know how long you're gonna have to wait, and you might never get it if you're close to the end of the game, or if someone else is trying to get the same thing as you.
Right. No, absolutely. And for folks that haven't played this game before, like the basic idea is you have one tile with, I think, 1 to 2 different ecosystems on it.
Yep.
Mountains, river,
forest, prairie, and wetlands.
Yeah.
I know it well.
Yeah. Yeah, you were right there for that. And then between 1 and 3 different animals that it could be played on it, but you have to choose only one. Mm-hmm. But then each turn you're picking up 1 animal token, 1 of 5. That is
4.
1 of 4.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah, 1 of 4, and paired with one land tile. And so you have some flexibility. There's little pine cone tiles that let you pick different ones that aren't necessarily naturally paired, but I mean, on some level, yeah, you're limited in what you
even
can choose.
paying one of those pinecone nature tokens is a choice that you have to make, that because each of those is a point at the end of the game. So if you're sacrificing it, that could still be a weighty decision.
Yeah, but no, great game, and a lot going for that one. That's a very fun
well represented on these 2 lists
for sure. Yeah. How about you? What's number 6?
Number 6 is Circadians First Light. So,
yeah,
this is my 3rd Garfield game in a row.
I'm not sure I remembered this was a Garfield
It is,
Games.
and the reason why it's different, so it is not as well known. I don't think it has generally been as successful as the medieval trilogy games, or even some of the ancient anthology games. But there are a couple reasons for that. The biggest one is that very quickly after they first released this game in 2019, they decided to pivot and announce a new second edition. They would come in a bigger box, have updated artwork, and a built-in mini expansion.
I remember you waiting for that game to come out.
I actually sold my first edition and then got the second edition. So they kind of did a rebrand because they wanted to have it fit better with subsequent games in the Circadians universe and have them all just, have that synergy.
Right.
The other big reason, I'm going to give two more. Second big reason, I think, is the artwork. It is not artwork by the Miko, like the medieval trilogy games, Raiders of the North Sea, Architects of the West Kingdom, so it's different. The artist who works on this game is actually Sam Phillips, Shem Phillips' brother.
Ooh, and universes collide.
Right, yeah. Family business. And his style, it is definitely not for everybody. I really like it. I don't think you like it as much.
Well, to me, I've only played this game I think once or twice with you, and for me,
you played the first edition, so you haven't even gotten the updated artwork experience.
I will say, this game wasn't on my list, but I don't think it was the artwork for me. I think it was more just, I think when we played it, I was just kind of getting into more complex worker and dice placement games, and yeah.
And I will say I
want to give it another play.
This is a pretty complex game because the third thing that makes it a little bit different is that this game is not designed by Shem Phillips. This is a solo design by S.J. McDonald, who worked on the West Kingdom trilogy.
Yes.
But he designed this by himself. And so I guess it's a little bit of a spin-off kind of vibe to it. But the thing that makes it complex is it's not just a worker placement game, it's actually a dice placement game.
Yes.
So in addition to figuring out where you'd want to put your worker, you also have to factor in what the value on your die is, because you may want to put it in certain places where it will be most beneficial. And it's not always the case that a 6 is the best thing. There are some places where putting a value that's too high, like the negotiation board, can hurt you.
Right.
And make you have a penalty, whereas sometimes it's very good to put a high value thing. So this one, it's really cool. It is a lot of fun. Love playing it, and it is also very different for me in terms of the theme, because as I actually didn't mention, that this game is a sci-fi themed game, and the whole premise is that you, the Circadians, are humans who are going to this alien planet, and you are basically doing research, fulfilling contracts. So you're researching things that are on the planet. You're moving around the planet board. You are upgrading your space station, and you are negotiating with the different local tribes. And each of the 3 tribes is a different alien race, and they're really cool because one of them is green, and they want you to give them algae in return for points or benefits. And then there's a blue one, and they want electric power, and then there's a red one that are kind of militaristic, and they want you to give them the red gems. Okay. I think if you like sci-fi, if you like a little bit more of a complex game, I strongly recommend this. And I think of the games on my top 10, this is probably the most niche one.
Yeah, no, it's a fun one. And I know I mentioned that I've only played it a few times. It's been a while, and I'd love to give it another go, because I think I've played some more games similar to this now, and I think I'd enjoy it more.
We will talk about a game that is similar to this that also involves S.J.
McDonald. I think we certainly will.
Yes.
So, are we to number 5?
We are now entering the top 5.
We are to the top 5.
Yeah.
Getting higher to the top of the mountain with every round. And so I think we're probably going to have some more repeats as we go on this list.
The top 5, I think it's going to be full of them.
Yeah, it certainly is. So, number 5 for me is a game that you've already mentioned, and that is Scythe.
Oh.
And I'm a big fan of Scythe, and especially as far as area control games, definitely one of my favorites. And I think I was going back and forth between this and another game I suspect is on your list. But the reason I settled on Scythe is something you alluded to earlier, and that is you can excel at this game and win this game without being very combat forward. Like,
you can win with zero combat.
You really can. Yeah. Exactly.
I have done it, and I've seen other people do it too.
For sure. And I think that was, I mean, you know, we'll do other podcast episodes where we get into, you know, common mistakes for first-time players. This is when I fell into a Scythe where I was thinking, oh, this is a combat game.
Right.
And with all the upgrades you can do and the objectives you're trying to reach, there's so much more going on that, like, I think you're often better off either trying to get a quick combat victory early or, like, waiting till you've built up your engine a fair bit.
I agree, and I didn't bring this up when I talked about it before. I kind of alluded to it in terms of our history with Scythe.
Yeah.
But so the first time we tried to learn Scythe, it took us so long, and we watched a bunch of how-to videos, and it just was not clicking. And I think part of why it didn't click is because when you look at it, your brain is thinking that it's one thing, and your brain goes to risk and fire and brimstone and people dying and
Small
armies crossing the world.
Something.
Yeah. And in reality, it has so much more in common with a Euro game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, it is an engine building game before everything else, and that is just not what you would think at first. And once you get over that hurdle, it just, like, unlocks, and it's a wonderful experience.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. What is the first game in your top 5, number 5?
Okay, so bear with me. This is the fourth and final Garfield Games entry.
Yeah.
So the rest of the top 5 will be different, and I know this is very heavy, but I like what I like, and I will not apologize because they're just excellent.
They are.
So the one that makes it into my top 5 is the newest one that you and I both backed on Kickstarter. I believe, I know for me this was my first ever Kickstarter experience, and I'm very glad that it was for this company.
Yes.
Did the promo cards, the metal coins, very happy with it. This game is Wayfarers of the South Tigris.
Yes.
The first game in the new trilogy, the South Tigris trilogy, and I love so many things about this game. There's only one thing that bothers me about this game, and it's very small, and I'll get to it. But Wayfarers of the South Tigris is part of this set of medieval trilogies that Shem Phillips and S.J. McDonald are working on. And you can tell that some of that dice placement mechanic that was developed in Circadians First Light made its way into this game, and it will continue to in the rest of the South trilogy, they've mentioned. This game is based in the same kind of time period as Raiders and Architects, but this time you are in the Middle East, specifically in Baghdad, and you are helping the Abbasid Caliphate basically explore the world. So historically accurate in that at that time, while Europe was in the quote-unquote dark ages, the Middle East was thriving in terms of exploration, culture,
scientific
science,
discovery,
astrology, astronomy, all of it. So in this game, you are basically helping to map the known world, and they even calculated the circumference of the world. So you start off in your home base of Baghdad, and you're basically building a tableau by exploring land, exploring the seas, and then above it all, exploring the stars. So by the end of the game, you end up with this beautiful tableau of just land and sea and stars that can have planets, the sun, the moon, comets, beautiful vistas, cities, harbors, open sea, and it just, when it comes together, it looks really great.
It really
What I will say, though, is that of all of these Garfield games illustrated by the Miko, I think this one looks the least great, at least of the ones on my list, in that the board itself is very beige, because it's basically you're going along a journal track. So it makes sense, but it's just a journal. It's just pages on a journal. And it's just covered with a bunch of icons, and we'll get to the icons. And then surrounding the board, there's just a bunch of cards that are basically a marketplace, and you draft them, and you basically put them into your tableau.
Yeah.
And then the tableau itself looks great when it's built out.
Right.
The dice basically work like workers, as was the case in Circadians, and then you also have workers that you can put on cards around the board to get resources, to get discounts, to buy tiles, to upgrade your caravan base. There's a lot going on.
There is.
Of every game on my list, and in fact every game that I own, this is definitely the most difficult, the least accessible, and I would not recommend this game or try to teach this game to someone who has not played another one of these Medieval Kingdom trilogy games in the past.
Yeah.
And that leads to my one criticism of this game, which is the iconography. It is not bad, but there is so much of it. Like, there is a symbol for every land type. There's a symbol for every type of animal you need to go to a certain land. So there's a camel, there's a pigeon, there's a sailboat, there's a telescope, there's a city, there's a harbor, there's all sorts of stuff. There's dice +1, dice -1, provisions, coins, every
There's
kind of type. There's a lot.
You're right about that.
And I don't really know a solution for it, but other than that, once you play it once, and if you've played some of the games that I mentioned before, because the iconography carries through, it is just amazing.
Yeah.
And I love this game. And I think it has so much good replay value, and it's just, you have so many choices that you can almost always find a way to do what you need to do.
Yeah, for sure. And I'd love to pick up the conversation on this game, because you probably won't be surprised that it's going to make an appearance on my list at some point too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
so we'll come back to it, but I think that covers like the big things. But
for sure,
overall, just absolutely stunning game.
Yeah.
Not for everybody. It's for the experts. It's for the people that want a challenge.
Yeah, it's definitely, like, in terms of complexity, you're working your way up to it a little bit. Totally agree. Number 4 on my list is a set collection game, one of my favorite set collection games.
Is this a game that I don't like?
It may be. It is Splendor. And yeah, I'm a big fan of Splendor.
I know. It's not that I don't not like it.
It's so, I mean, what it comes down to me is, like, it's just such an elegant, tight, in some ways an engine builder, because you are, like, building up your buying capabilities. And yeah, so I mean, you are playing, I also think the theme's really good. Like, you're playing as Renaissance, like, gem collectors, and you're, like, collecting gems of different colors, 5 different colors, and using them to buy up gem cards of those 5 different colors. Some of these cards you're buying are worth no victory points, but they're increasing your buying power for later in the game, because you have 3 rows of cards that your marketplace that you can buy from in the base game. Lowest level cards are the cheapest, then second row that's mid-level cost and point value, and then the top level cards where you're probably not going to buy more than 1 or 2 of them over the course of an entire game in that top row, but
they're worth a lot.
But they're worth a lot of points. And so a couple things I like about this game, I mean, honestly, in a way similar to Cascadia, I feel like this is a game that's pretty easy to teach, but like, there are subtleties to it that are, it takes at least a few times playing it to master, just in terms of, like, maximizing turns and, like, thinking about how, the moves that you're making are affecting other people and vice versa. The other thing I'll say is this game has some really good expansions that I think build on what it's doing really well.
I may be wrong, but I think of any game that I've seen in terms of buying one single expansion box,
yes,
you get the most value
for sure
out of that box, because there's, like, different modules.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You get the base game, and then one single expansion box unlocks 4 additional play modes, basically. And so, you've got one that makes it easier to like reserve cards to basically block other people from buying cards that you want. You've got another one where, basically adds a secondary market caravan where you can buy additional cards from it. And the thing that's fun about that is you can sometimes do a little chain reaction thing there where you buy the right card in the top level and it allows you to get a free one in the level below that. And so you can chain it together in some really interesting ways. But
nice.
But yeah, no, Splendor's a fun one.
I should correct. It's not that I don't like it. It's just it didn't wow me the one or two times we played it, and I feel like it didn't click. But I could see it clicking.
Yeah, and I think if we worked in an expansion or two, I think you'd
yeah,
get
it felt a little bit plain. So maybe the expansions would spice it up a bit.
Yeah.
All right. So that was your number 4.
That was number 4. What's number 4 for you?
Mine is Ankh, Gods of Egypt.
There we go.
This is the reason why things will not be fitting in the trunk to go to the cabin, because even though I did not support this on Kickstarter at the time, because I didn't know about it at the time, I've since slowly acquired all the bits and pieces, and it's just so much fun. This is an area control game that is set in Egypt, as you can tell, and each person plays as a different god, and each of these gods is a massive, I hesitate to call them a miniature because they're so big.
They're big.
They're probably like 6 inches tall, some of them, and they're so detailed, they're beautiful, and each one has an asymmetric power. You upgrade each one through upgrading your Ankh powers. There are giant guardian minis that you can recruit, and you're basically trying to become the one remaining god of Egypt as Egypt goes from polytheism to monotheism.
Yeah. And
you're playing on this big, beautiful map. You can, kind of like Scythe, you can be deceived into thinking that this is all about pillaging and destroying everything on the map and just killing other people. But this is a really, really nuanced, clever game in how it handles combat, in that each combat event is triggered after every few events, and there can be up to 5 of them in a game, and you play a card each time you're in a battle with somebody, and some of these cards will actually reward you for losing by giving you followers that are kind of like your currency, or giving you devotion points for dying. And devotion is how you win the game. So I've had situations happen where like I got more devotion from losing a fight than someone else did from winning, and that is just really dynamic. And you also get a ton of devotion for controlling monuments, having a majority of each monument type on the board, and there's 12 different gods if you have everything for this game. There are dozens of gods. I think there's like 8 level 1, 8 level 2, 8 level 3 guardians.
Yeah.
There's so much, like, there's a whole book of different modules for how you set it up. So I think this game just has so much replay value.
Yeah.
I haven't even really like scraped the surface of it, and I've definitely played it probably over 15 times. I have played with every single god except one from the Kickstarter expansion that I only got last week.
Yeah. Well, and so the Guardians, you've got, I think, is it 1 or 2 of each level that you're playing with in a given game?
It depends on your player count, and it also depends on the module that you're playing.
Got it.
So it could be up to 3.
Up to 3.
The level 3 ones, I think there's only 2. But this game is just, I love it. It is a bit polarizing because of one mechanic. If you're playing with 3 to 5 people, there is a point in the game where the 2 players that are furthest back on the devotion track will merge into one mega god.
So these are the 2 players that are at
losing,
the lowest score at that game.
And they will drop back to the person in last place spot on the devotion board, but they will combine both their god powers, their followers, their guardians, and it's supposed to be like a big catch-up mechanic. Some people absolutely despise this and say it ruins the entire game. I really like it because it's so different, and I've been on both ends of it, and I think it really works. And it can make you think like, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't screw Ryan over because he and I are going to merge, and I don't want him to be that far behind. So you think counterintuitively.
It changes the game theory.
Yeah, and I've seen people win as the merged god and come back and win. I've seen people be ahead and still win despite the merge. So I don't think it's broken, and I think it just adds so much value to the game. And if you don't like it, I guess you could just not play with it. And there is actually one module in it that plays with no merge. Yeah. So again, it just gives you so many options. There's so much going on, and this is my favorite area control game, and it's just the most stunning experience to look at on the table because of how dynamic those miniatures are.
Yeah, no, the miniatures are incredible. They really are. And I think the other thing I agree with you on is the merge mechanic, because like it's I think it's one of the most innovative ways, I think, to get around the problem, like someone's really far behind and becomes disengaged.
Exactly.
Because like this, like, but at the same time, it because the two players are falling back to that lowest player spot, like you're not going to have people tanking on purpose either.
No, and you also don't want to tank on purpose, because something else that is a little bit controversial about it is that, as I mentioned, there are 5 conflicts that can happen.
Yeah.
If by the end of the 4th conflict you haven't made it past a certain point on the devotion track, you are completely eliminated from the game.
Right.
Like player elimination style, you are out.
Yeah.
I could see why some people don't like that, but as I said, I've probably played this 12.5 times, maybe approaching 24 times. It has never once happened to anybody.
Right.
And as I said, it's at the end of the 4th conflict. There's only one left. So at very worst, if it did happen to someone, like they would only be out maybe 15, 20 minutes of the game, and you could just see how that last conflict plays out.
Yeah.
And having that person who has no chance of winning out of the game would just speed up that final round anyway. So that's Ankh Gods of Egypt. Love it. Super cool theme. Super cool table presence. Very fun twist on area control and combat.
Totally agree.
So that brings us into the top 3.
This does bring us into the top 3.
What do you have?
Well, I'm pretty sure that 2 of our 3 are the same.
I agree with that.
And so, my next one, my number 3 is Wingspan.
Okay.
And
that is not my number 3.
That is not your number 3?
No, but do tell.
But I think for Wingspan, there's so much to love about this game. It's one of my favorite tableau builders for sure. And I think the artwork on the cards is really, really stunning.
Mm-hmm.
I also just love the attention to detail. The fact that every card is unique.
It has like some kind of fun fact or scientific info or a map of the world with where the bird comes from.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
Is really, really fun. Another thing I really like about this game is there are multiple paths to victory, and I like the complexity of the scoring, where especially once you get into some of the expansions, like the Oceania expansion, to me, like, if you have a game where there's only 1 or 2 components to the scoring, I feel like a lot of times you lose something in terms of replay value. But in this game, I like that you're pulling scoring from 5 or 6 different categories, and like it makes you, one, pay attention to every turn, because you are turn limited. You are turn limited, and you become more turn limited as the game goes on. So I imagine many listeners have played this game, but I probably should have led with just like a basic intro. But basic idea is you're starting a bird sanctuary, and so you are playing bird cards with some with various abilities, some that are just worth points at the end, and playing them in different habitats, acquiring the food to play the cards, and
laying eggs for points, laying eggs for cards.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
each of those 3 habitats is paired with one of those actions.
Right. So like every turn you're taking an action of either playing a bird card, drawing more bird cards to your hand, laying eggs for points or to pay for bird costs, or gathering food. the artwork in this game. I really like the bird powers are really fun. Like the engine building, I think making the engine building so modular, I think is a really fun
and
mechanic.
it's so satisfying
It really is.
When you gain food and you have 4 birds in your forest, which is paired with the gain food action, and you get your food, but then you also get a bunch of extra stuff or more like cached points.
Yeah.
It's so satisfying.
It really
Love
is.
Wingspan.
Very fun game.
And we will come back to Wingspan, but first I'm going to give you my number 3.
Yes. What do you got?
My number 3 is Everdell. Specifically, the complete collection.
Yes.
Which you and I both own.
Yes.
And I think it is important to say that the complete collection is really what makes this game. Because
Agreed.
If it wasn't for all the expansions, I think this game would still be in my top 10. But it would be much lower down.
Probably not top 5.
Definitely not in the top 5.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because I think, as you mentioned with Splendor, there's some games that once you play through them a couple of times, they get a little bit stale. And I think that base game Everdell can fall victim to that because the deck gets repetitive and the spots on the board kind of stay the same.
Yeah.
But with the expansions thrown in, this game just transforms into like... It's so dynamic. There's so much replay value.
It really shines.
I would honestly recommend, and I would just say, even if you're teaching someone Everdell, and I've done this recently, I would not play without the New Leaf expansion because it adds in additional cards in the meadow. It adds so many new cards to the deck, more flexibility in how you score points, as well as the Belfair expansion, which gives you the marketplace, unique player powers. It's all great.
Yeah.
And then Spirecrest and Pearlbrook, you can put those in if you want some more like modular challenges.
Yeah, I would. Would you agree that probably for first-time players, not adding in Spirecrest
depends who it is, but generally, I don't think you need to. I think you with New Leaf on its own, you could just have an amazing experience, and Belfair.
Yeah, it gives you enough.
Yeah, but this game, I mean, it also is just probably my favorite game in terms of its artwork. Mm-hmm. It is adorable. It is all about... If you read Redwall as a kid, you would love this game. It is all about like anthropomorphic animal creatures who are building a city in the woods.
Yep.
And you're just building a little mine and putting your miner mole in it, and then you build a palace and your queen comes and live in it, and she's a little cute mouse in a dress. It's great. Like, it's so much fun, and it gives you that same satisfaction that Wingspan gives you in that once your tableau starts to build out and chain, you get so many resources, you get many cool abilities and powers. Everdell is great. Strongly recommend if you love this game, if you played the base game or are curious, play the base game. If you like it, definitely delve into the expansions and you will not regret it. That's my number 3, Everdell. The complete collection.
Love it.
Top 2 time.
Top 2 time. And, well, we probably don't need to belabor my number 2 game that much because Everdell is my number 2
The
game.
complete collection.
The complete collection, exactly. The other thing I agree with pretty much everything you said about Everdell. The other thing I will say is I like how it kind of pulls like components like inspired by other games and like kind of like mixes them up in its own kind of unique medley. I'm thinking of like with the Pearlbrook expansion, you've got the wonders that you can build, which is, you know, kind of reminiscent of Architects of the West Kingdom.
Very reminiscent. It almost makes that game like Architects in a lot of ways.
It really does. And another thing I really like about this game is, the Spirecrest expansion, especially in a lot of tableau builders, this applies to Wingspan as well as Everdell. I feel like you're so conflicted on those last turns because there's so many different directions you could go and you're just trying to maximize points to the best of your ability. And I feel like Spirecrest in particular accentuates that dilemma because not only are you conserving resources to play So
buildings in your city.
Yeah,
or critters.
your last few. So yeah, you've got your tableau of 15 spots in your city, building a combination of buildings and critters, and you're trying to fill that up. But you also have resources you're trying to set aside to go on your journey for your bonus points. And yeah, both of those can be worth a lot of points at the end. So it's going to be very case specific which option's better for you in a given game.
And before we move on from Everdell, I do want to say about Spirecrest, the giant animals.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that.
They're amazing. There's like a moose, there's a vulture, there's a peacock, there is a grizzly, a yak.
And
it's
not
awesome.
only
you just ride them.
And not only are they visually stunning, do you want to just touch on?
Oh, they're very powerful. Like
yeah.
You basically use them instead of one of your workers, and they can do what your workers do, and then each of them has a different unique power that might give you additional resources or an extra movement. They're very powerful, and they make you feel great when you have them. It's like the Guardians in Ankh. You just feel like you're going to win no matter what because you have this amazing figurine on your side.
Oh yeah, that's very true. I will say the one thing that makes Spirecrest, I would say the most challenging of the expansions is that's counterbalanced with the fact that you have season cards that make resource gathering more difficult.
Yes, it's mean. But yeah, if you like a challenge,
yeah,
enjoy.
Absolutely.
Great.
So this brings us to number 2 for you. Yeah.
Yes.
What do you got?
My number 2, this is going to take us back to the discussion we had at the very beginning about Dune Imperium.
Yes.
My number 2 is Lost Ruins of Arnak.
Excellent.
The game that is constantly compared to Dune Imperium.
Yeah.
And Dune Imperium is constantly compared to it.
Yeah.
In that it is a combination of worker placement and deck building.
Yeah.
And Lost Ruins of Arnak, I love it because, unlike Dune, I think the theme is cool. I'm not really a Dune fan. I don't generally love IP games. Yeah, and I think Dune Imperium just visually doesn't look as cool.
Yeah.
But Lost Ruins of Arnak is basically like Indiana Jones as a board game, unofficially.
Yeah.
You are exploring this deserted island that has the ruins of this lost civilization on it, and you are basically venturing further and further along this research track that will eventually lead you to the lost temple of Arnak, and you can take tiles from that temple to get points. You discover new sites on the island, and each one of them is beautiful, and when you find it, you'll have to defeat the scary guardian that is guarding it. It could be a giant frog or a giant spider or a lizard or some scary animal, and they give you points when you defeat them. You get little idols from discovering new sites, and it's basically a really satisfying resource management, worker placement, deck building experience where you put your workers on sites, you get the resources on that site. You can spend coins to buy items. You can spend compasses to buy artifacts. The artifacts are really powerful. The items go into your deck, and you draw a new hand every time. So you're building your deck. You want to exile the fair cards that take up space in your deck and do nothing but make you lose a point at the end of the game. You can hire assistants. And basically, as you go along from round 1 to round 5, each round is just going to open up. And you're going to have so many more options for what you can do, kind of like Everdell.
Yeah.
And it's just so satisfying when you can just like chain a bunch of things, play a bunch of cards, move your people around because of special abilities, defeat guardians, have the right icons, and it lets you move up that one extra space on the research track, or discover one new site, or defeat one new guardian, or draw a new card from your deck. And it's a chaining experience of excellence. And even if you don't win, if you felt like your engine was up and running during the game, you're just going to feel like everything clicks together seamlessly. And I will just say, for the one expansion that's out right now, I think there's another one coming out at some time in 2023. But right now, the Expedition Leaders expansion, I think it's a must-have. And I have taught people the game with it. The game expects you to. It actually suggests that of the 6 expedition leaders it gives you 2 that it recommends
for
first time players. And it's not that they're more powerful or less powerful, they are just a little bit more accessible.
More straightforward.
Yeah. So one of them is literally his power is you get an extra worker.
Right. So you
very easy. Just give someone that one, they can get going. Yeah, this game is beautiful. It is awesome. The artwork is amazing. The theme is really cool and different.
It is.
The only thing I don't like is I think that some of the components and the box itself feel a little bit cheap.
The tablets.
Relative to some games. But overall, it's amazing. Like, the arrowheads and the tablets and the rubies are really nice plastic. Everything is thick cardboard, except for the player aids. Love this game.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one. And, I mean, I'm a big fan of this game, too. I probably would have put it in my top 10 if not for the fact that I know how much you like it and figured you probably would.
So it got representation.
So yeah, I wanted to switch it up a little bit and throw a little bit of love to Dune Imperium's way, but glad that both the games got a little bit of a mention here. But yeah,
I have no clue what your number one is going to be. I think you know what mine is going to be, but
I do. I think so.
What is your number one?
My number one is Wayfarers of the South Tigris.
Wow, why didn't I think of that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I blanked. Oh,
yeah.
obviously.
But yeah.
Although I'm shocked Architects didn't make it.
I know, because you know how much I like Architects of the West Kingdom. But, so, basically my thought on this was, I love Shem Phillips games. And, I mean, just from the four that you've talked about, like, from Garfo games, like, big fan.
Yeah.
For this, just based on the criteria I put for myself of, like, weekend camping trip, bringing 10 games, wanted the variety. I wanted to, give a little space for like other designers, and so I just limited myself to just one Garfo game. But this one is absolutely my favorite one for a lot of the reasons that you talked about earlier.
And it was my favorite too. I mean, it was in my top. It was the only one in my top 5.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a few things about this game that are really fun. I think the big thing for me is like it's a tableau builder, but like it's like a multi-layer tableau builder.
Absolutely.
Because not only are you building out your land and sea cards to each side of you, building out from your initial player mat,
and above it too,
with the constellations and
then
the
tucking
planets.
The townsfolk under it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's so much going on, so much to keep track of. And then I also really love one of my favorite mechanics from Garfo games in these medieval trilogies is the worker placements of different colors, and having color-coded workers that some workers can go
right to, like it was in Raiders of the North Sea.
Exactly, Raiders as well, where you have some restrictions on where you can place your meeples. Some can only go to spots that I think are like blue or green, and some can only go to spots.
The way it works is there's yellow and blue.
Yes.
The yellow is kind of tied with the land
right.
area. The blue is kind of tied with the water, and then some can do both. And the green is basically a wild. The green can go on anything, and there's somewhere only the green can go.
Yeah, and I really like that mechanic of the game because it introduces just that extra layer of strategy where you're that added limitation to what you can do with a meeple. I also like the fact that you're combining meeples and dice placement and just have that variability too, where you've got two different components of your worker placement and both of them have a limitation on how the workers can be used.
Things.
And they do different things as well, right?
Yeah, I think you're right that like if you had to choose one, not only is this my favorite, but I mean we obviously have not talked about Viscounts of the West Kingdom or Paladins of the West Kingdom or the other two North Sea games, or
Shipwrights, right?
Yeah, or some of the ancient anthology games or Circadians, Chaos Order. Those are all their other games. But I think of the ones that I listed, I think that something that I really like about Wayfarers is that it is almost taking mechanics from each of them.
Yeah.
Like you have the different worker colors from Raiders.
You've got the adornments.
You have the dice from Circadians. You have the townsfolk and inspiration cards working as adornments from Architects.
Yeah.
There is so much going on, and again, as we said earlier, that can be a little intimidating, and there's a learning curve, but once you unlock it, it's amazing.
Yeah. So I think we're both in agreement on that, and I think but yeah, a good idea to work up to it. Playing it with someone who's at least played some other complex worker placement games, and maybe starting with Raiders of the North Sea or Architects of the West Kingdom and working up
if
to
only
Wayfarers.
to get the iconography.
Yeah.
The only other thing I'll say about this game is that I have only played it at 2 players, and I'm curious to see how it would feel at 3 or 4. And
That's fair.
Because 1, it takes up a ton of space on the table once you build up that tableau.
It does.
And 2, if you're not playing where people are taking snappy turns, there's a lot going on, and it can be paralyzing. So if you have a high player count, it could take a little long, and you could have big gaps between turns to the point where you may not even remember what you were going to do on your turn.
Right.
Which again, that's partially, some players do that more than others, and also just when you have that much going on in a game.
Yes, especially the first few times you play it.
So maybe don't play with more than 2 people until everyone involved is familiar with the game.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good caveat. But yeah,
great,
fantastic game.
And my number 1,
yes,
is Wingspan.
Love it.
Yep. So, as I said with Everdell, I will say this is Wingspan with the expansions.
Yes.
Particularly the Oceania expansion.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, something that you love about Wingspan with the expansions is the flexibility.
Yes.
And the multiple strategies.
Yes.
Base Wingspan has been criticized, and I think we've had this experience of the final round becomes an egg-laying fest.
Yeah.
Where you just lay eggs for every turn as long as you have spaces to put eggs. Once Oceania, and then the European expansion was just more birds.
Right.
But once Oceania came in, it really shook things up. Because you add in the nectar as a wild food. You add in the game end birds. There's a new player board that actually nerfs the eggs, so you don't get as many eggs as you did on the original board. And the board itself also gives you options for resetting the bird feeder, resetting the bird tray. The birds themselves have new powers that let you score points in different ways. So there's many new ways to cash food or tuck cards.
Yeah.
Or do other things that score you points. Draw bonus cards. Yeah. So it really encourages you to lean less on just laying eggs.
Well, and it increases the opportunity cost of choosing to lay eggs.
Exactly, because you might be missing out on other things. It really just adds to the game. The Asia expansion is also amazing. I particularly love the kind of push your luck elements that some of those Asia birds have.
Yeah. And
the new 2-player mode is fantastic. It really spices up a 2-player game in terms of how the end round goals work without detracting from the game itself. It's still Wingspan. It just adds a new 2-player element to it that I really like. Cannot wait for all the other expansions, and I look forward to putting them all in my giant first printing nesting box that I'm very happy with. And yeah, I think just as I said with Cascadia, I just love that I can teach this game to anybody. I love that win or lose, you just feel really proud of what you've built at the end. I said that with Cascadia, Wayfarers, Everdell. It's amazing just having that tableau in front of you and feeling like you built something really cool.
Yeah.
And, this is not the most complex game on my list. It's probably not the one that even impresses me the most or that is the most exciting, but it remains my number 1 because I know that I'm always gonna be in the mood to play Wingspan if someone suggests it. There's never a time I'll be like, oh, I can't do it tonight, or that's boring. And if I play it, it's gonna be a strategic experience. It's gonna be a relaxing experience. Basically, anyone you're playing with is gonna have fun.
Yeah.
And the theme is amazing, and I give it so much credit for kind of launching this new period of nature themed board games into the stratosphere. Like, there's so many games that are coming out now that are based, Cascadia included, based on national parks and animals and plants and all this stuff. And I think Wingspan really was the breakthrough in showing that that is a successful theme and there's an audience for it, and it brings so many people who don't even like board games that much into the hobby. Like, I've seen Wingspan for sale at gift stores in national parks.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and there's not many games that do that.
Yeah.
I think it deserves so much credit for that, and I think that makes it worthy of a number one spot.
No, for sure. I think that's a great choice. And I mean, you just Elizabeth Hargrave, the game creator, you just really see her, you know, passion for the subject matter shining through.
Yeah, I mean, she's designed multiple games. None of them have been quite as successful as Wingspan, which that's a nor should they be. Like, Wingspan, yeah, Wingspan is a generation-defining game in the hobby, like Catan was, or Ticket to Ride. Like, it is that level. So by no means should she be expected to do that again. Like, it is an achievement in of itself. I haven't played her other games. I'm kind of curious to play one that's coming out this year called The Fox Experiment. That's all about, like, breeding foxes in Russia.
Huh.
Yeah, sounds interesting. Again, nature themed. She did Mariposas. It's about butterfly migration.
Calico?
No, she didn't do Calico. She did Tussie Mussy. That's about flowers.
I see.
So it's definitely her thing, and also, I mean, she has brought so many new people in based on the theme. Great to see a woman designer in the hobby that's, you know, been very much dominated by men.
Historically,
yeah, and I just love Wingspan. I think it deserves all the praise it gets, and I know that some people don't love it, and some people think that it's too solitary and there's not enough interaction. And that's fine. If that's not your thing, it's not your thing. But for me, it just is perfect. And it's not a huge time commitment. So you can even play another heavy game, like play a game of Wayfarers and bust your brain, and then, you know, just close out the night with a game of Wingspan, and everybody will be happy.
For sure. And, you know, I'm really glad we did this too. Like, we had some overlap in our lists. We also had some that, you know, were not the same as each other. And I think even the ones that were the same, we sometimes like different things about it. And
definitely.
I like how we were kind of able to bring some of that out in the conversation today.
Yeah, and I mean, we did talk about each of these games a good bit, but these games will definitely be back in future discussions. We will review them as they deserve to be reviewed.
Yeah.
Some of them we may have separate discussions of their expansions.
Yeah.
Some of them we may
talk about
rank
gameplay.
them relative to others in their series.
Mm-hmm.
Or we may have a great Dune versus Arnak debate. We'll see how that goes. And then some of these, like Wingspan, Lost Ruins of Arnak, Wayfarers of the South Tigris, will definitely have future expansions coming.
Yes.
And we can look forward to the sequel to Scythe coming in a few months.
Yeah, Expeditions, that's right.
Yep. So these games will be back if you're interested in learning more about them. And we will probably do another top 10 at some point.
Yeah.
And we'll see which of these stand the test of time, or which were one-hit wonders that, you know, fell off the charts.
And which
and who can topple them.
Yeah, which usurpers are added to the top 10 list in future editions. But thanks for tuning in. We'll see you at the gaming table.